All right, this example is to help you learn how to use the writing a compound name side of the flow chart that you should have picked up this morning. So, for example, I have these three formulas that we're going to go through where I help you to see how do you use this flow chart. Because moving forward, you're never going to just be given only ionic compounds or only molecular compounds or only acids. I'm going to give you a jumble of them all. And so in order to name it or write the formula correctly, you have to know the type of compound it is first. Okay. So the flow chart is super important for that. So now you always start at the beginning. So where it says start, that's always the first question is, are there more than two elements? Okay. So we kind of talked about this when we looked at different compounds, specifically acids and ionic compounds, because that will tell you if you have a polyatomic ion or not. And so then that does not tell you the type of compound though. So you have to ask, is H first? Because if it is, then you have an acid type of compound. And so then you would follow the format to know how to name it, okay? If it does not start with H, then the difference between molecular and ionic is if it contains a metal. So if it contains a metal, then it would be an ionic compound. So you do not use prefixes. If it only contains nonmetals, then it is molecular. So you do use prefixes. So there is that difference there. They're very, very similar, ionic and molecular, but the molecular use prefixes. Okay, so we're going to go through this flow chart. I'm actually going to just write on here because it's easier than flipping back and forth. So the first example I have is CaBr2. Okay, so if we're looking at the formula CaBr2, the first question to ask ourselves, are there more than two elements? We've got calcium and we've got bromine. So that's only two. So we are going to know that both of these elements are going to come from the periodic table. We're not going to have a polyatomic ion in there. Okay, question two. Flow back down to question two. Is H first in the compound formula? There's no H. We have calcium first. So no, we would follow the track back to the left. Okay, now next question that tells us the type of compound it is. It's not an acid. We know that for sure. Is there a metal? Now this is where we have to remember everything to the left of the stair step line is considered a metal. So calcium is in group 2A, which are called alkaline earth metals. So then yes, we do have a metal in our compound. So since we have a metal, then the type of compound it is ionic. And so to name it, we just use the name of the cation, the first thing, and the name of the second one. And if it's from the periodic table, like we said it is, we change the ending to IDE. So Ca is calcium. So this would be the name. So we'd have calcium. And then we do have to be careful on the cations of ones with Roman numerals. Now, calcium is not on that list, so we don't need a Roman numeral. But then the Br, instead of calling it bromine, we would name it bromide. And that is it, calcium bromide. We do not use a prefix for the two because it is not molecular. That is the correct answer for an ionic compound name. Next, we're going to do NCl3. So NCl3, first question, we always start, are there more than two elements? We only have two. We have nitrogen and we have chlorine. So no, there's only two elements. That means no polyatomic ion. They're both coming from the periodic table. Question number two, is H first? No, it's an N first. So that means it's not going to be an acid. So it's either going to be ionic or molecular. Last question, is there a metal? Now, looking at the periodic table, nitrogen and chlorine are both to the right of the stair step line. So they're on the right side of the periodic table. Since they're both on the right side, that would be considered only nonmetals. So no, we only have nonmetals. That means it is molecular. And since it's molecular, We use the prefixes to tell how many of each atom. There's no crossing, there's no charges. It's just number one, number two. Second one changes to IDE ending because it's from the periodic table. And then one other thing, remember that we only use mono on the second. So if you want to write that down on your paper, you're welcome to do that. That you only use the mono on the second. All the rest of them, you would use it on the first, but mono gets only used on the second. So since there's only one nitrogen in its first, we're not going to call it mono nitrogen. We'll just say nitrogen for the N. And then the prefix for 3 is tri. So we'll put tri in front of the chlorine, but instead of chlorine, we change it to chloride. So the name for NCl3 is nitrogen trichloride. All right, last example to go through this flowchart. We are going to look at HNO3. Okay, first question, are there more than 2 elements? Yes, there are this time because we have hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. So that means that it will contain a polyatomic ion. So we will have to look at the list if you don't recognize it right away. And by looking at that list, that half sheet of paper, you will recognize NO3 as a grouping on there. And NO3 is called nitrate. So I'm just making a little note right now to help us out later. Okay, so NO3 is a polyatomic ion. So the name of it is nitrate. That came from our list. Question number 2, is hydrogen first? Yes, yes it is. So since it is first in this formula, that means the type of compound is an acid. So when it is an acid, then we have to use this table to determine the name. And so you determine it from the second part of the formula. What is the name of that anion? The second part. So that's why I wrote down that it is nitrate so that you can see that it ends in ATE. Okay, so when something ends in ATE, we're going to follow this bottom line where we're going to do this. There's no hydro in front. Not everything gets hydro when it's an acid. And we're going to take the root of the word. We're going to drop the ATE. And so we'll have nitr, so NITR, nitric acid would be the name of HNO3. Make sure that you write the word acid as a part of the name. That is important because on the flip side, if you're given the name first, it's really easy to tell it's an acid when it has acid in the name. So hopefully this helps you out. Use your flowchart to help you with the assignment on its learning. And you get 3 chances on that. So if you don't get it right, all right the first time, take it again, get a better score.